Hey guys, it's Cam from Craft and Tailored. In this episode of What Is On My Wrist, we are talking about a no-date sub from 1991. The reference is 14060, and they are super awesome. It's a watch that I like a lot, and it falls into this neo-vintage category, which is something that we've been talking quite a bit about on our channel and in our blogs and on our Instagram and all that good stuff. So perfect watch for discussion, and this is a good example that I'm quite fond of. So figured we'd talk a little bit about it on our show, or whatever you want to call this thing. Okay, so let's dive into the details. Yes, I know it's another dive watch pun. I'm a watch idiot savant. Big emphasis on the idiot part. So little W, big I, little S. So in any case, let's talk a little bit about the history of the 14060 and why it kind of falls into this neo-vintage category. Essentially, for you guys that don't know what this neo-vintage kind of thing is, essentially it's a watch that has 1 foot on the side of the vintage purest fence and then 1 foot on the modern side. So we see technical differences and also stylistic differences while still kind of retaining to a little bit of the purest vintage side. So it's kind of a transitional watch in that regard, where it's not like your ceramic sub, but it's really not like a matte dial sub either. So it kind of has the best of both worlds, and these watches are increasing in popularity, also in desirability. So we've seen a lot of movement in these watches over the past 3 to 5 years, and this is a model that definitely falls into that category. The 14060 was introduced in 1990. The last Rolex 5513 Submariner was produced in 1990. There are very few 1990 Submariners. Technically, the last year of Rolex 5513 Submariner production is 89, but we have seen a couple of examples that fall into the 1990 category. Same year as the 14060, but basically, this is like the new and improved version of the, kind of stereotypical benchmark no-date Submariner, which is the 5513. The 14060 featured a number of improvements from the 5513, including an increased depth rating of 300 meters or 1,000 feet versus 200 meters or 660 feet. So major improvement there, because the 200 meter depth rating was a depth rating that was kind of a benchmark depth rating for almost all Rolex Submariners. I'm not talking about Sea Dwellers or anything like that, but the introduction of the sapphire crystal, trip lock crown, and some other minor improvements allowed Rolex to increase the depth rating on their kind of entry-level tool watch or dive watch, which is really cool and interesting. The use of 904L stainless steel. So Rolex was using a higher grade stainless steel that was more resistant to corrosion or anything like that. So the 14060 got that. And the other thing that's really interesting is Rolex introduced a unidirectional, not a bidirectional rotating bezel. So we have the introduction of the click spring in the no-date line of subs. I believe the first watch, actually I know the first watch that Rolex produced that introduced the click spring was the 16800, which is essentially the date version of a no-date sub. So the no-date sub got the click spring in a unidirectional bezel versus a bidirectional bezel, and the 14060. And essentially the reason why they did that was because if you were timing something like decompression or bottom time or something like that, the unidirectional bezels had a tendency to slip, so you'd lose your reference point. This way, you had an extra kind of fail-safe measure for accurately placing the triangle at your desired point, and then also less resistant to bumping or movement. So the 14060 got that. Obviously, we have an updated movement, so essentially a better movement with this watch as well. The earlier versions still retained a 93150 bracelet, which this is, so kind of a carryover from the 5513s, which also leveraged a 93150 Oyster heavy bracelet. Same thing here, we still have the diving extension inside the clasp of the bracelet, and then it's kind of your stereotypical, normal flip lock clasp. The earlier 14060s leveraged a non, solid end link bracelet. So again, a 93150. But they did eventually transition to solid end links, and then also they removed the holes on the side of the case. So the earlier examples are a bit more desirable. The examples that retain the 93150, as well as the holes through the lug, are kind of again a desirable element. Most of the 14060 Submariner examples feature tritium lume dials, which have again become very desirable and add to kind of the vintage appeal to this nouveau vintage type of watch, meaning that the tritium luminova will take on a patina, whereas super luminova, which were introduced in 1999, early 1998, don't do. They just stay very white and kind of have no depth or character. So again, that is kind of a unique feature to the 14060. At least in the earlier examples, they retain that tritium luminous material. So in essence, the 14060s are kind of the perfect cross between, old and new with modern advancements, but yet they still kind of leverage and retain that classic design for, a no-date sub. So they wear great. I really like them, and the price point is pretty accessible for a watch in good condition, whereas if you're wanting to get into the vintage Submariner world, things can get pretty expensive pretty quickly for kind of what we would consider a more run-of-the-mill vintage matte dial Submariner. Let's talk about the specifics on this watch. It's just kind of a good example. There's nothing, I would say, overly special about the watch. I wanted to talk about the reference because I think it's a good entry point into Submariner land for a lot of guys, especially if you're into no-date subs. But this one is just kind of nice. It has a really nice bracelet that doesn't show a lot of stretch, kind of just normal wear. The lugs on the watch are nice and even. The dial has a kind of a warm, but not overly patinaed look to it. It's just kind of a good, basic, everyday sub. If you're gonna have one watch and one watch only, and you wanted a Submariner, this would make a great example. So I'll provide a link in the description below so that you can check out our entire collection of 14060 Submariners, but kind of a great entry point watch and, iconic. I mean, I have been wearing this watch, it's great. I like this watch differently, but also kind of the same as my 5513. It just provides me with like a little bit more of a modern kind of feel. The great thing about these neo vintage watches as well is that, if you spend, let's say $13,000 or $14,000 on a matte dial Submariner, you're gonna be a little bit more careful with it, right? You might not go jump into a swimming pool with it. You might not really push the limits of the pressure rating on the watch. If it's got a meters first dial or a gilt dial, right? Those dials are far and few between, very hard to replace if anything gets damaged, and same thing with parts. The 14060, on the other hand, sapphire crystal, triple lock crown, you can dive with this watch. You could jump in the pool with this watch. So kind of again, that perfect balance between something that's vintage and has vibe and character, but also something that is functional. So you could go use it, you could live with the watch, and like I said, I think it would be a good daily driver. So again, I'll provide a link in the description below so you can check out our 14060s, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe as always. Also be sure to check us out on Instagram because that's where we post the latest updates and content from Craft and Tailored. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you in the next one.